want to start with Raj Koneru. You have a conversational sort of AI platform, a bridge. How do you sort of overcome, in a country like India, for example, how do you overcome the difficulties, the challenges around language, around change of cultures? India must be a very difficult place to have a large language model worked on.
I don't think so. I mean, if you rewind back beyond 3 years, right? AI existed then as well, in a different form, without large language models. So the challenge then was the fundamental challenge of understanding what a human said. What is the intent, that the human said. So natural language understanding, processing was a thing, which the large language models have solved, for the most part. You get 99.5% accuracy in understanding intent in any language. So the pace at which they've trained these models with content and data from different languages is amazing. We deploy pretty much to almost every language in the world with our platform. And we use different LLMs for different use cases, different languages, both voice models and text models. And the understanding levels are immense. The text-to-speech models are also really good now, essentially. So the practical use cases that people expect, on a voice input, voice output, or text input, any length of the text, any length of the instruction, is pretty well done right now. So India is actually ripe to take advantage of that. Basically, the language is not a barrier. The culture is in the experience, in the design of the AI agent, so you build that in. It doesn't come with the model.
How do you account for local diversities and local divergences that happen in a country as big as India?
Well, local diversities is in the form of dialects. Basically, dialects are already trained in many of the models. Of course, India is coming out with its own models as well, which we've started to integrate and use as well. In terms of other diversity, it's the language, right? I mean, it's the way the experience is delivered. Is it a professional experience? Is it a humble experience? That's, like they say, is the beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. So you, the designer of that AI agent, build that in. That doesn't come from the foundational model.
Let me ask Ms. Culloty about, obviously AI is infused with big capital all around the world. The big tech companies have invested billions, if not trillions, into it. In a country like India, what are the innovative financing models that you're looking at, particularly, in a resource-crunched country like India, where, the average per capita is about $2,800, $3,000 per annum? How do you address the resource crunch? Because AI needs a lot of big money.
It does, and there's a lot of money supporting AI. And when it comes to investment in AI systems, I think if I think about boardrooms, and I'll go down smaller into the market. If I think about what boardrooms are looking for, when companies are making investments into AI systems and AI models, the board is saying, watch your cash flow and how you're investing your cash. And I want to see a return of investment as soon as possible. And the big question mark is, when will the return of investment come? And what we're seeing more and more of is that companies, in response to that board question, is they're matching their cash flow, they're matching their investment to the future return that's going to come. And that's through a variety of different financial models. And when it comes to AI systems, AI models, financial models, I got a top tip from our CTO. And she said, think Tahoe. Tahoe? What do you mean by Tahoe? She said, trust. Think about trust. Who are you going to trust? And what does trust mean? Who is going to be accountable for the AI system, the AI model, the ecosystem, the financial model? And right now, we have to have human oversight, the Tahoe model. And regardless of what you talk about when it comes to AI, I have found that you've got to think about where is trust within the system, where is accountability within the system, and it's really difficult to find and to ask the right questions, and where is the human oversight going to be. And when it comes to the financial model, it's no different. You have to understand where are you going to get the financing capability to support your investment. The big model builders are getting backed by structured finance. It's the big banks of India, it's the big banks of the world that are supporting the model builders and taking an absolute risk as to when that return is going to come. When it comes to enterprise customers, some of them are working with the hyperscalers on an investment, and some of them are doing it on-premise. And they're looking at leasing financial services, opportunities, and what we offer is a circular approach. So we look at models like, do you have current infrastructure that we can look at and give you value for that current infrastructure? And you invest in the new infrastructure with the infrastructure you already have today. You can free up investment. And equally, this is large-scale deployments of infrastructure. And is it going to last 3 years? GPUs are coming to the market every 6 months, 12 months. How long is the infrastructure going to last? How long will it stick for? So there's also a risk when it comes to the infrastructure. How long is it going to last? When will you need to upgrade? And that's why you really need to look at financial solutions. And just the last thing I would add is when it comes to those investments and it's public sector, it's the government investing, it's really to acknowledge that this is no short-term investment. You have to match the investment to the return that the public is going to see. And the public can't have this AI system or model stopped. It's got to evolve and keep going. So it's a continuous investment, and it needs to be fed. There needs to be governance. There needs to be cybersecurity. There needs to be an ecosystem around AI. And that's a whole new level of a budgeting process and a thought process that wasn't there previously. So I think it's very similar for private sector and public sector, but the odds are higher when it comes to public sector.
Pushmeet, if I can ask you, DeepMind's done a lot of work on cutting-edge areas like protein folding, climate modeling, health diagnostics. How do you decide what is important, both from a maximum social impact, changing the lives of maximum number of people as possible, as also what Ms. Culloty said? I mean, at the end of the day, what is the risk to reward ratio?
So I think the main when we look at these questions of which problems we want to focus on, we look at impact. Impact is the thing that really drives all of this. And impact can be of different forms. It's not just commercial. Sometimes it could be scientific. Sometimes it could be social. Sometimes it could be commercial. And I'll give you an example of the problems that we look at when we think about all these different segments. Why did we choose to work on protein folding? So proteins are the building blocks of life. The fact that I'm speaking to you in this room and the fact that you are hearing what I'm saying and making sense of it, these are all proteins in action. Our bodies are just made up of water, mostly. 60% of our bodies is just water. So what is this magical thing that makes us tick? It's proteins. They are the Lego building blocks of life. And yet, we don't understand them completely. That's why we work on AlphaFold, to understand what is the shape and function of these proteins. Now, what is the impact of this? This is a root node problem. Why am I saying this is a root node problem? Is because if you make a breakthrough in this problem, it will not just impact one particular industry or one particular problem. It impacts a whole spectrum of different things. So if you understand proteins, you can, of course, accelerate drug discovery. If you understand proteins, you can diagnose people better. If you understand proteins, you can develop new enzymes that can decompose plastics. If you understand proteins, you can build better crop species that can be resistant to different fungal infections for food security. So that basic problem of protein folding comes across in so many different impactful applications. And that's the true impact. So when we think about what are the problems that are worth investing, we look at this transformative impact that will happen in any of those dimensions. It has to be transformative. It has to really leverage and show the power of AI. Right? If you look at if something can be sort of incrementally sort of achieved, then that's probably not a good fit for a grand challenge sort of mission that we sort of take on. Now, I mentioned protein folding, but there are so many different domains where we are seeing the same sort of thing. I don't know how many of you saw that Lee Sedol versus AlphaGo match in South Korea, which has been sort of, which was almost 10 years ago now. I don't know, but I would recommend that you should watch that. That was an amazing moment where an AI system invented something which went beyond human knowledge. And that was a magical moment, that Move 37. And we are seeing that Move 37 play out across many different scientific domains, across biology, across chemistry, across material science, across sort of enabling fusion. And that's, I think, the true sort of promise of this technology.
Gautam, as there is promise and as there is hope of, AI transforming virtually every industry that we know, there also are problems that come with it. And one of which is in your industry, which is, detection of cyber fraud, fraudulent transactions, etc. We are now suddenly in India seeing this whole problem of digital arrests and online scamming, particularly elderly folks who are not, digital natives, getting, caught in this whole vortex. So how are you using AI, not just for fraud detection or cyber fraud, as it were, but also to make commerce much more inclusive, how to make AI systems much more inclusive, particularly for smaller companies, medium-sized companies, etc.?
Thank you. Actually, before I answer your question, sure. I wanted to just follow up on what Ms. Culloty talked about, which will connect back to the answer that I gave for the question you asked. Because the topic says boardrooms to communities. Your question was, or you made a statement that India is a resource-crunched country. How would we make LLMs work, right? I actually have a very different point of view. At this point, I would say we are actually resourceful. And what I mean by that is, Hemant talked about earlier that we can't wait for the infrastructure to be built. We have to go into the application and start being a leader there, which I think I'm fairly confident we'll get there. But on the infrastructure side, what Mastercard has been doing, and which we have found very interesting, it was not in our core business, essentially to localize some of the LLMs that are there. Ambassador Quatra talked about this morning, how do we localize, right? We've found this very unique piece of technology that we've partnered with this company called Kore.ai. What they do is essentially, as part of localizing these models, they're essentially saying we'll go to the villages, SMEs, farmers. They are doing activities in their daily lives. They are tilling their land, they are sowing the seed, they are buying produce, they are selling their produce, they are buying input for their goods. They're actually seeing a bullock cart maybe walk in there, go past in their village. They are showing them pictures of activities that villagers are used to seeing in their daily lives. And they're saying, just transcribe this in your own language. What do you see? And they're feeding it back to these LLM models, right? And in the process of doing so, they're actually helping the model itself get more localized, get the language that you were talking about earlier. And in the process, just building up. Now, in return, these guys are getting paid for it. So that's where the communities are getting impacted. We in this journey, we're making sure that the infrastructure layer that we don't have today, we are on that journey using the strength that we have, the population that we have, the skill that we have, the fact that we have a diversity of language and education to our advantage. Now, why do I talk about that in the context of the question you asked? Is because in your question you talked about inclusion, right? So as a payments company, of course, our DNA 20 years ago was how do we prevent payment fraud from happening? And we always call it, you have to detect something and make sure that in the detection phase itself, you sort of stop it from happening. If it happens, then how do you prevent it from, spreading? And then if it actually spreads, how do you react, right? So we call it the detect, prevent, react sort of model, which has been, honestly, in different words, the same 3 words we've been using for, last 20 odd years. It started with very basic systems, right? And then we started calling it intelligence systems. Now we call them AI systems. This was our bread and butter. We had to do that. When I joined Mastercard 12 years ago, fraud rates were relatively high in the payment ecosystem. We are seeing fraud rates that are, in single bips today, right? And most of these frauds today even are mostly social fraud, right? Social fraud, I don't want to say you can't solve for them technology-wise, but they will always happen because social fraud has an element of lack of education and somebody just giving into their system, right? But we have come a long way using AI and whatever we called AI before it became a term to actually help in fraud detection. Where we are going with that now is we just announced something yesterday called agentic commerce. We did India's first agentic commerce transaction at the Bharat Mandapam yesterday. The whole idea is the future says that people are going to start using agents. We will be using more agents in our lives. We'll be doing tasks for us that we today do. And in that, you'll have to create trust, right? So is this agent a trusted agent that is working on my behalf? So we are, of course, saying for us to democratize, we have to make sure that we are putting the safety, security, trust element into these agents, which is where we've always played a role in. The other thing we're making sure is conversational chats. Wherever people are today, who knows who will be the winner? Gemini, Chat, GPT, I don't know, right? But everybody that is using these systems today, we're making sure that we are embedding ourselves in the agents that are being used in these systems. And more importantly, are we solving for the population at large, right? Cards, historically, anywhere in the world, were a very sort of affluent, product, But if you see where digital payments is going today, and again, using India as an example, no shame in saying this, UPI is not an affluent product. UPI started as being a mass product, right? And that's how the scale came in. So we are saying AI for us, is going to be how do we bring people, how do we include them into the financial ecosystem? So how do we go beyond payments and frauds into credit access? So we are using AI today, creating AI models in helping banks do better job of their credit modeling, risk, assessment. The other area we're doing is just commerce enablement, right? How do you show the right offers, right? The more relevant offers. How can your N be N of 1, right? How can it be hyper localized, right? And be very specific to what you need. How can it, in the real sense, read your mind and do the search for you, the discovery for you, the payment journey, the commerce journey for you, and then the payment journey for you. So that's really where we are focused as a payments company.
Let me ask Mr. Paul Shea, you've led the US Peace Corps for a number of years. You've led, communities of volunteers across multiple geographies. How does, the advent of AI, how do you marry that with community engagement, developing local trust, particularly, in underserved populations? How does one do that?
Yeah. So at the root of Peace Corps is developing trust through immersing ourselves in that culture. When we have volunteers who want to go serve overseas and partner with the community, what we do is we train them on the local language, we train them on the customs, we train them on the culture, and we have them live in the local communities. They don't live with other volunteers, they live with the community, and with that, they develop an understanding of what problems are facing that community and what problems they want solved. And so by doing that, whether it's in education or whether it's in microfinance or whether it's in environment health, our volunteers are there to see what it is that those communities need solved. AI, being that it is something that can be applied across all the sectors that Peace Corps is in and addresses local problems, that is the way that we can provide value and use AI to amplify what we do already. It's not something where we come in and say, hey, this is something that we can do, and so we want to fix it for you. Because if you do that, you're not developing trust. You're not hearing what that person is saying. It's not a partnership anymore. Now it's much more of a top-down. And in this case, Peace Corps we want to be durable. We want to be a handshake deal as opposed to a lecture. And that's the type of thing that Peace Corps brings to the table. And AI, again, is a way for us to amplify what we do already on a much larger and much more impactful scale.
Mr. Magnus Ewerbring, in the previous session, Mr. Hemant was talking about how India can't afford to wait for for the physical infrastructure of AI to be built. It needs to get ahead in AI applications. How can telecom infrastructure, by companies like yours, telecommunications infrastructure, how can you design it in a way that it's not cost intensive in a country like India where, cost crunch are a reality of life? And as the previous speaker said, not wait for the physical infrastructure to come around, which may happen in 2 years or 5 years, but ultimately use the leverage of AI for public good.
Okay. Yeah, I'm audible. So, I mean, first of all, a token appreciation. I think India has outstandingly good 5G networks. Very good. The coverage in India is well over 90% population coverage. That means all cities covered, right? So the footprint where this superior service, mobile service, is available is top-notch. Still, I should say, in those areas, there are people who don't enjoy the service. One part of that is, of course, price points of devices. But here, the scale and volume of India plays in. I think in Q3 last year, 87% of all smartphones sold in India were 5G capable. And the lowest tier, cost tier, 70 to 110 US dollars, grew the most, 1,600%. That's a phenomenal. That's good for India, it's good for the world. A lot more people will all of a sudden have a very good internet connection in the palm of their hands. So that plays in, of course. That's just volume and scale in technology. Then if you look the other way around, even if you have over 90% population coverage, it shall continue. It shall continue year after year. It's a long game. India is a huge country, and it takes some time to build all of that coverage. And it's also many decisions. I think the mobile operators work with this. We work with it, of course. And then how can we serve that? Key thing is that our equipment for every year needs to become more potent of reaching further out. Now we come into physics. A lot depends on geographies and so on. But already we can serve, say, picking up a device 200 kilometers away from the antenna. That's a fantastic reach. But you need favorable geographical conditions, right? That's laws of physics. So it's trade-offs. How often you put the radio towers and what kind of performance you need. But even so, when you have a placement of these radio sites, we need to make sure that the gear becomes more sensitive. That is to say, can listen more accurately, pick up weaker signals. And here AI comes in as a very good path for us to improve the way we process the signals more and more. And just as a small example of that, we recently made an improvement using part of AI foundation in the system and are able to then decode 10% more out of the radio spectrum than before. And as you may be aware of, all operators world over think that the license cost for spectrum is too high. Well, if you all of a sudden get 10% extra of that, that is a huge advantage. And that's on our side by deploying AI technology. So that comes in place. It comes in place downtown Delhi, but it certainly comes in place in rural areas and improves then how well a user can receive the signal from the radio mast.
Mr. Koneru, the flip side of what Mr. Ewerbring was talking about, the maximum growth he's seen is in the lower end of the pyramid, as it were. That also means that there is a limited ability to pay. Right now, the big question is who's going to pay for all of this? Right now, the big investors are paying for it, the big venture capitalists are paying for it, the big banks are paying for it. But when it comes to a stage where people have to begin to pay for it, and India is a very price-sensitive market, how do you tackle that challenge, particularly when it comes to creating maximum social impact, but somebody needs to foot the bill as well?
Well, if you notice the pricing of models, right? Go back 2 years to what it is now. It's like down to 5%. So as scale grows, the unit price comes down. That's the same with GPUs, maybe not yet, but it will happen. The investors are footing the infrastructure. So overall, at the end of the day, people, whether it's a consumer or an enterprise user, are going to use applications. So when you look back and see where the value accrues, when you take a dollar spent, a minority of that dollar is spent on infrastructure, eventually, not at a point in time, but eventually. And that infrastructure includes models, basically. So when you look at the pricing of ChatGPT for India versus in the US, it's significantly lower because of the scale, essentially. So I think naturally, because of the scale, the unit price will come down and has come down, essentially, and that makes it more affordable. Ultimately, whether it's OpenAI, it's Anthropic, it's NVIDIA, it's anybody, want the scale. So from a scale point of view, India offers the best scale of all, essentially, whether it's an enterprise user or it's a consumer. Consumers are already using it. I mean, there's probably more ChatGPT users in India than in the US at this point, essentially. So that's on its way. Enterprise usage, like we talked earlier, takes investment and a return on investment expectation, basically. I think and therein lies the point in time challenge, right? When a model is available to everybody in the enterprise, everybody experiments. So the 95% that fail is that 95% that was never thought through, that was never prioritized. The investment was very low, essentially, and so experiments flourished. But now what we are seeing in our customer base, and these are large enterprises, I know one of the top 4 banks in the US, who's a customer of ours, did a survey within the company, 250,000 employees, and some 5,000 use cases came back saying, hey, this is valuable. If I have this, I can do my job better, or we can do this better. But really, the company only prioritized 20 use cases, which had the highest value, but also had the highest investment, which had significant impact for themselves as a company, and for their customers, essentially. So that prioritization, takes time. That investment is required, and the ROI needs to be there. So I think enterprise usage over time will change. But ultimately, if you think about a world where everybody has a personal agent, as a consumer or as an employee, basically, of a company. That personal agent has knowledge of the data that I have access to. It has knowledge of how I do my job and what job I need to do. And it's going to help me do that, basically. A lot of things I did things in a certain way 30 years ago, I don't do anymore. With the advent of the internet, the cloud, and mobile. The same thing will happen with AI.
But isn't that scary that here is an agent that perhaps knows you more than your wife does?
Well, I'm glad it's the AI agent that knows more than my wife. But it's all about why do I have an executive assistant? Okay? It's because that there are things I don't need to be doing. I could be doing better things, right? Or more important things. Same thing with an AI agent. It's a helper. It makes life easier for you to focus on the things that matter and not focus on the things that don't matter, essentially. So when you have that world where billions of people have these personal agents that are helping them at home and at work, that scale, will dwarf the issue of cost, which we see today.
Ms. Culloty, when it comes to social sector, whether it's health or education, these are not sectors that are going to give you, as you said, returns or risk to reward in the short term. You have to be invested in it for a number of years, if not decades. How do you analyze that? I mean, what kind of financial models, risk to reward models are you bringing to the table to analyze where to invest and how to invest, particularly when it comes to these social sectors?
Well, the good news is that we're experts in the technology. So when you know how the technology works and performs, you can take risk with the technology. And at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, that's what we do. We invest in our customers' technology, knowing how the technology is going to perform and knowing how the customers use the technology. And it's the workloads that sit on the technology that give us the biggest indication as to how much risk we're actually taking. I think a great example of how we're taking a circular approach to an investment with a customer in their AI technology was we worked with the high-end performance compute center in Stuttgart, Germany. It's called HLRS. And we work with them on their supercomputers. We know how they work, we know how they perform in terms of the workloads they put on those systems, and they do it for the education sector and research and development within Germany. And for example, they needed to invest in a new supercomputer, right? They needed more GPUs, newer GPUs. And we took back their old AI system, their old supercomputers. And we reused 90% of the technology. There's an element of it that needs to get destroyed, obviously from a security perspective, but 90% of that old system could be reused. And we were able to take the funds that came from that and allow the customer to invest in their new system. So there's unique and different ways, because you know the risk that sits with the technology and the risk that sits with the customer, you can figure out financial models that help and support the customer. And I think that's what's, you know, really unique within this market, that yes, we've got new AI. It's new, it's different. We're not entirely sure when the ROI is going to come, but we do know how the technology performs, and we know the end customers. And both of those together help us to adopt a more circular approach. The one thing I would say is with AI models, there is risk inherent in an AI model. It's inherent. And I go back to my Tahoe, like trust, accountability, and human oversight. I think for right now, it's absolutely critical that you realize that there's no one individual in your business that knows it all. And it's you as leaders that need to be asking the questions when it comes to the AI models. Where is the trust? Where and who is accountable? And where is the human oversight? And, you know, a great example of that is healthcare. You know, algorithms are used. You were talking about proteins earlier. Algorithms are used to process health insurance in the US all the time. Algorithms learn, and the model learns, but it might learn something wrong, and it makes the wrong decision, and it makes the wrong choice. And you need human intervention. You need human oversight. And there will be new jobs and new roles with AI models. And I think that's a really good example of where that exists.
Pushmeet, the conversations around AI are, you know, right now in 3 or 4 ecosystems of players, right? There is the big tech companies, the Silicon Valley, then there is the investor bunch, whether they're VCs or big banks and so on. And then, of course, there's academic institutions who are at the forefront of it. How do you use AI for real-world problems? I mean, I'll give you a problem. Traffic is going to be a mess in Delhi over the next 3 days. How do you use AI to solve that?
Yeah, so I think the main issue here is how do you frame the problem and what do you want AI for? Because AI is not something like magic sprinkle dust where you just sprinkle something and it will just be better, right? It needs to be thought of intentionally and thoughtfully. Why do you need AI? That's a question that you should ask. Different problems have different use cases and different uses of AI. I'll tell you one example. In the case of AlphaFold, what was the problem? The problem was that there was this huge amount of, I mean, not huge, but some amount of data that the scientific community had collected over multiple decades, where they had invested almost sometimes $1 million to get one single structure of a protein, right? So millions of dollars had been invested in collecting that data, which for 150,000 proteins. But you needed to extract the insights from that data to be able to predict what, given a new protein, what will be its 3D structure. So you needed great data extraction and reasoning to be able to do that. I will give you another example. AlphaEvolve, our system for doing advanced code optimization. So that it essentially leverages something else, which is the ability of AI systems to scale reasoning abilities. So rather than one single software developer trying to optimize the system, or even the best software developers, best team of software developers trying to optimize an important system which is going to cost you a lot of money, you have this AI system which is going to try sometimes billions of different techniques. So we ran Alpha Evolve, our coding agent, on Google's own compute infrastructure. So our compute infrastructure which decides which problems are run on which computer, optimizing the data center itself. And this algorithm had been optimized by some of the best researchers and the best engineers at Google, some of the best people in the world. We ran Alpha Evolve. It outperformed all of them. It came up with a new solution. Now, we are all talking about the amount of money that is going into compute. Can you predict what will be that proportion if you make advances in making your compute stack more efficient? And if you can run these algorithms much faster, it just pays for it multiple fold, right? It pays for itself. So that's where the real sort of benefits of AI come in, that you have to take the approach which is problem specific. And you have to really think about which competency of the AI system are you leveraging. Are you leveraging its competency to extract meaning from large sort of unmeaningful sort of data? Or is it the ability to reason at a scale which no single human mind or even a team of humans can do?
Gautam, you're essentially a financial company, but you have to work across sectors. And when you do that, for finding solutions to real-world problems using AI, what are the sectors that you have found there is most promise in not just helping your business, but also helping the businesses that you partner with?
So, of course, financial services across communities is number one for us, and we've seen that. Some of the areas where we are testing the algorithms that we've built, healthcare is one of them. We are looking at healthcare. We are actually looking at road infrastructure. So Pushmeet talked about, or rather you talked about this traffic situation in Delhi. So we were with the NHAI about 18 months ago, and the guy at NHAI said, we've built 20,000 kilometers of roads or highways in India already. We knew where we needed to build it. Where should the next 20,000 come from, right? Where should we focus on the next 20,000? So we looked at the models that we've built using the payments data sets that we have, and we looked at what we did, and we said, listen, we can change the data sets to be traffic data, right? If you can give us traffic data of how truckers are moving in the country, how you're collecting tolls in these not so great highways, we could potentially help you understand where the next 5,000-10,000 of highway should come about, right? We are doing a network optimization in stores. So what does that mean? If you're a physical store and you have a physical store in a particular pin code, and now you want to open another one, which is the right pin code, that you should optimize for. And we are going into the level of detail where should it be on the left-hand side of the road or the right-hand side of the road, because depending on how traffic moves. So we are seeing that in retail. Now, a lot of these things sound very mundane, things that, one could say that technology could do 5, 10, 15 years ago, which is true, right? AI has just advanced the speed at which we can do these things and the accuracy with which we can do. But these are some of the use cases that we are seeing. In fact, very recently, we ran a pilot with the SEC, with the SEBI in India, right? Which was essentially how do we help them understand potentially questionable transactions? Are people trying to do insider trading? Are they making trades that are not legitimate, right? It was a very, very successfully executed sort of a pilot that we did with the SEBI. So what we've done is, because we, unlike the big tech companies that are investing in the so-called lowest level of stack in the stack of innovation, we are still on the applications stage, and we are saying how can we take our algorithms but able to apply other data sets to our algorithms and solve for this industry. So we're also in a bit of a learning mode, if you will. But these are the few examples that we've been able to successfully demonstrate our ability.
Mr. Shea, you know, I guess this is true for the Peace Corps as it is for any other organization, that you believe in community developed solutions, community-oriented solutions, which come from the bottom up. Whereas with AI, what we are now seeing, at least, is most of these solutions are coming top-down. How do you invert that pyramid?
So, again, for us, AI is a tool that we are going to use to address those problems that the community identifies. So we can still harness the power of AI by taking a look at what problem is facing that community and saying, let's develop a solution that is specific to that. If there's a problem in one community that is in a sector, let's say it's a health problem, that might not be the exact same. So you might have a resource-constrained health environment in one country. But at another one, you might be seeking how to optimize treatment schedules. AI is a tool that you can use for either of those things. You're still taking the problem from the ground up, but you're using this tool that's provided by everyone here today. And for us, that is using AI for good at the community level, is really making sure that we don't go in and say, well, we solved this problem in this fashion in that community, we're going to do the same thing here. Instead, we're going to take that solution at the tool level and apply it to the problem at the local level.
And I'll give the final word to Mr. Ewerbring. In terms of the lessons that you can learn from other markets, of course, every market is unique in its own way. What are the lessons that you reckon can be applied in a place as big, as diverse as India is for those community-led solutions that Mr. Shea was talking about?
Okay, so if we talk, let's say, very rural coverage, there are many different tracks to go, and part of the answer, it depends. It depends on the circumstances. But I think there is a space here where private sector and public sector can cooperate. Again, as a reflection on India, the fantastic 5G networks that are present here today are really thanks to enormous private investments by Reliance Jio and Bharti Airtel. It's a big bet for the future that the private side has done there. As we go further and further out, I think the public sector can also play a role. There are some basic things that we sometimes stumble upon. Is there a road to where you want to put a radio mast in the countryside, right? And is there a power grid that you can connect it to? Maybe there isn't. Then there needs to be a road good enough for a tanker truck to drive over there, etc. So the fundamental infrastructure needs to be there. And here I think private and public can work a bit together. Also, India has many villages and still villages that should be connected over time. Now, what is the usage in those villages? Can the public sector be a front leader there? Are the schools, if they get the connectivity, using it? Are they using that to bring in knowledge, say, knowledgeable people online helping the local pupils in the village? Is healthcare being provided online, as an example? I think much of the public sector can be a user of these systems, not the least in remote areas where there's no connection today. And how can the public sector help to upskill the local community? I'd love them to use AI, but they need to be educated on it. So hand in hand there, I think private and public sector can do what's reasonably possible to do to drive these services to truly everyone.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. AI for good from boardrooms to communities. Can we have a round of applause for our panelists, please? Thank you very much.